and a former vice president of the World Bank, and chairman of the Consultative Group for International Agricultural Research. He's been a distinguished professor at a number of universities around the world and is a member of many academies, as well as serving on numerous commissions, boards, and advisory committees for academic research and non-governmental institutions. He's published more than 100 books, 500 articles, his own mini library, and not surprisingly, Dr. Serageldin has received more than 40 honorary degrees and numerous awards, including the French Order of Arts and Letters, and I'm happy to say the Public Welfare Award of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. And that is the highest award given by the Academy, voted on by the members, and it is to award extraordinary use of science for the public good. He has indeed made many contributions to his science and scholarship, but also as a renowned public figure and thought leader. I'm even told that he's often referred to as the most intelligent man in Egypt. So we are certainly fortunate to have him with us today, and I will turn the floor over to him so that we can all benefit from his knowledge, reflections, and experience. Dr. Serageldin.
Thank you so much for this very kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very special honor to be invited to address you today. This special day when the academies of the world gather for their triennial meeting. And what a place to have our meeting here in Egypt. And what a time to have our meeting. There'll be more on that in a moment. So welcome to Egypt, where Imhotep, 5,000 years ago, was the first scientist, the first human being whose name was recorded not as a ruler, but for the power of his intellectual pursuits. He built the stepped pyramid of Saqqara for his pharaoh Joseph, the precursor of all the pyramids that were to follow. And some 300 years later, the pyramid of Khufu, with all its complexities, would become the oldest structure on the planet. And for 45 centuries, would hold that title until the Eiffel Tower in the late 19th century. Welcome to Egypt, where medicine was invented and the brain was given a name. It was also that same Imhotep who proclaimed that illness was neither curse nor magic, and that it could be treated with surgery and herbs. Welcome to Egypt, where the first woman scientist found her immortality. Pesachet, overseer of women physicians, about 2400 BC. And 100 years later, in nearby Mesopotamia, Enheduanna, priestess of Ur, gazed at the heavens and became the first astronomer with name Keynote. Welcome to Egypt, cradle of the written word. Alongside Mesopotamia with hieroglyphics and cuneiforms, writing appearing in both places some 6,000 years ago. Then in Egypt, in the turquoise mounds of Sinai, the earliest alphabet took form some 3,800 years ago. The Proto-Sinaitic script whose descendants, Phoenician, Greek, and beyond, would bring alphabets to the languages of the world. Welcome to Egypt, home of the ancient Library of Alexandria, that luminous precursor to all houses of knowledge, the first academy, for it gathered the greatest minds of the ancient world in all fields, and within its space of freedom, they met, experimented, debated, and advanced science as never before. Welcome to Egypt, the heartland of the vast Muslim world that stretched from Spain to India, and that for a millennium during the European Dark Ages ensured that open debate was tolerated, the empirical method was valued over the opinions of the ancients, and where the Indian numerals and the zero were adopted, the algebra was added, and all found their way to Europe as Arabic numerals that mark our days today. Welcome to Egypt, where the great Ibn Nafis in the 13th century called for openness to the contrarian view and asked that we engage with that view, for it could be bringing a new insight, a new truth. Listen to his powerful voice from the 13th century, where he says, when hearing something unusual, do not preemptively reject it, for that would be folly. Indeed, horrible things may be true, and familiar and praised things may prove to be lies. Truth is truth unto itself, not because many people say it is. And he went on to say that views of the young and contemporary are bound to be more important than those of their elders, for science and knowledge are built cumulatively and bring transformative views. So the elders should listen to the young and know when to defer to the new generation. To those among the youth of my part in the Muslim world and Arab worlds who seek to restore some sort of identity by violence and rejection, I say, open your eyes and look at the greatness of these forebears who formed the empirical method, who demanded the openness and defended it and lifted the torch of reason for 1,000 years. These are the people who advanced the world and passed on the torch to Europe in the 17th century. This is the great legacy waiting to be revived so that new generations of our people will take their place at the forefront of the global scientific enterprise by dint of hard work, openness, and collaboration with the other, not by rejection and violence. So that our youth will be the producers of science and innovation, not just the consumers of technology and applications. That is how your contemporary identity can be constructed. What a place Egypt is for the academies of science to meet, to draw strength from our numbers in this gathering, and even as we draw inspiration from our forebears in this land and that long legacy that stretches back into the mists of time. And what a time it is for us to meet. We inhabit an age of breathtaking scientific and technological advance. Even as societies are shaken by hyperconnectivity, disinformation, and mounting global instability, at the very moment when humanity confronts existential threats from climate change and pandemics and food insecurity, international order is fraying, and collective action grows more elusive. Technology accelerates discovery at an unprecedented speed, transforming fields from protein folding to genomics. Yet each breakthrough carries risks as well as promise. And it falls to the scientists, through academies and universities, to ensure that innovation is governed by ethical, evidence-based constraints that safeguard humanity. Meanwhile, in our world, inequalities deepen, discrimination persists, and gains against poverty and hunger have begun to reverse. Science itself is under pressure. Institutions of knowledge struggle to maintain authority amid political polarization and resurgent bigotry. It is a moment where, as Yates observed, things fall apart. The center cannot hold, and the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. A global disinformation ecosystem that erodes public trust in expertise. Social media, once heralded as a tool for enlightenment, has instead amplified division and undermined rationality. These challenges unfold in a period of extraordinary global turbulence. The Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals reflected moments of rare consensus. Yet today, the rules-based multilateral system born after World War II is being weakened by the very powers meant to uphold it. At a time when planetary crises, from climate change, biodiversity loss to water scarcity, demand coordinated responses, cooperation falters. The scientific frontier itself is both exhilarating and unsettling. ICT, AI, and the new biology are transforming our understanding of life and matter, yet our regulatory frameworks lag way behind. The institutions meant to guide responsible innovation struggle to keep pace with technologies that diffuse globally at unprecedented speed. At the same time, societies face rising inequality, renewed hunger, mass displacement approaching 125 million people today, and the destructive return of war. The promise that knowledge and connectivity would foster informed, harmonious communities has instead given way to polarization and anti-scientific rhetoric. The custodians of science now find themselves defending not only truth, but the very idea of a shared reality. Viewed across science, education, technology, society, and international relations, we unmistakably inhabit turbulent times that echo Dickens' famous paradox, an age of wisdom, age of folly, hope and despair, with everything before us and nothing to show. So what next? Well, against that background and in this place and at this time, my remarks focus on three broad topics. First, why do we have academies of science? I will argue that their work is a global social public good, one that deserves greater recognition and stronger support than ever before. Second, how are their traditional roles reshaped by our turbulent age? We stand amid revolutionary advances in science and technology, yet societies are ensnared in hyperconnectivity, social media, and rampant disinformation, even as faith in education and research erodes. At the same time, humanity confronts existential challenges, climate change, pandemics, food insecurity, while the international order undergoes tectonic shifts and the commitment to multilateral action is being torn. Third, based on these reflections, I would like to advance 5 specific recommendations for the academies to better meet the demands of the present and the future, honoring their obligations to society while engaging young scientists who must help build today and imagine tomorrow. We can and we will rise to the challenge of our time. So how about science as a global social public good? Economists generally classify goods by whether they are excludable or rivalrous. And by this measure, basic scientific knowledge, mathematical truths, physical laws, biological principles clearly bear the marks of an absolutely public good. It is non-rivalrous in that one scientist's use of relativity or CRISPR diminishes no one else's ability to use the same material. And it is in principle non-excludable because once published, knowledge cannot easily be withheld others. Thus, science occupies several categories at once. Basic research is a public good. Science literacy is a merit good. Applied science may become private or club-like, and knowledge vital to resilience like climate, health, water emerges as a public social good. Except for those areas that are truly private, like patents, proprietary research, confidential data, or partially club-based like paywalled journals, membership databases, restricted laboratories, the scientific enterprise must be sustained by public investment. Few undertakings repay society so richly. And what is more, it has enormous positive externalities. For the pursuit of science requires the promotion of what I have called the values of science. Along with Bronowski, I believe that the scientific enterprise, its spirit of exploration and problem solving, rests on accepting a set of essential values without which this research cannot exist, and which we, the scientists, protect with a vigor and a tenacity that really put to shame all other disciplines and professionals. First among these values is truth. Fabricating data is the unforgivable sin in science. Even the most celebrated researcher is cast out on falsehood. Second, honor. Giving each their due is a core ethic. Plagiarism is the second gravest offense. Citations, footnotes, references safeguard credit. But Newton captured this obligation towards the preceding scientist's contributions in his famous remark, "If I have seen farther, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Third is teamwork. Today's advances arise from teams more than lone geniuses. Laboratories, not isolated desks, produce most breakthroughs. We must teach young scientists the ethics of collaboration and the fair sharing of recognition. And fourth is accepting a constructive subversiveness. What do I mean by that? Well, science advances by challenging existing paradigms. Each generation reshapes understanding, yet reverence for earlier giants remains undiminished. Einstein did not erase Newton. Renewal is built on the scientific endeavor. It is an essential part of it. Fifth is transparency and openness. Progress requires open data, clear methods, and disclosure of conflicts of interest. Only with such transparency can peers replicate, critique, and refine results, sustaining the ceaseless dialogue at the heart scientific enterprise. And the sixth is engaging the contrarian view. Science grows by confronting opposing ideas, even those from the youngest or most unlikely of voices. Remember that Einstein, in his miraculous year of 2005, 1905, was only 26 years old, did not have a PhD, was not in university, was simply an employee. And he published these 5 papers because challenging Newton in all established physics. And it was Max Planck who was kind enough to publish them. But he recognized it doesn't matter where it comes from, it's the ideas that count. And indeed, in confronting opposing ideas, even those from the youngest or most unlikely voices, only the idea matters. Nationality, race, religion, gender, or age of the scientist advancing the idea does not. Ad hominem attacks are banned in the scientific community. And finally, we have a method for settling disputes. For science, authority lies not in any individual, but in its method. Evidence and rational argument is what decides. Now, these values serve not only science, but society. They nurture openness, tolerance, and reason, qualities urgently needed in an age of polarization and misinformation. But looking to the future, academies must now consider how to meet the demands of a rapidly changing world, fulfilling their obligation to society while inspiring a younger generation of scientists to help build today and imagine tomorrow. New scientific frontiers, merging disciplines, and emerging risks requires academies to assume roles far broader than ever before. AI, with its vast promise, may also encode racial or social biases. Professional societies can drift towards self-interest rather than public service. And universities, reinventing themselves in an age of distance learning, struggle to redefine that purpose. But as many leading professors belong to the academies, their guidance is essential in shaping new educational models and ensuring that young scientists receive both rigorous training and meaningful career paths. In the coming decades of automation and AI, academies will almost certainly deepen their influence on education and professional associations and structures. AI will profoundly reshape education. Attempting to ban it is futile, just as trying to ban calculators once was. Tomorrow's professionals will be judged by how well they use AI. Blue book written exams, oral assessments can still test students' comprehension, while students learn to work with AI as a trusted intellectual tool. Now, this will accompany major transformations in universities, which must renew their commitment to research, nurture the next generation, rethink their relationship with society far beyond the old town and gown divide. And I have much to say about how to transform education in the age of AI, but that is another discussion for another day. Let me stay here with what I recommend that the academies should do to meet the challenges of our turbulent times. And most of those turbulent times, perhaps, is the anti-science politics of disinformation. For one of the greatest challenges ahead is confronting the waves of anti-science disinformation now sweeping through social media, undermining trust in vaccines, GMOs, and climate change, complicating public policy. Not all scientists can be charismatic communicators, yet the public desperately needs trusted voices. Academies and learned societies can unite professional communicators with scientific experts to explain complex issues clearly and counter the rising tide of misinformation. But academies must also widen their own internal dialogue, address ethics, intergenerational equity, inequality, diversity, human and animal rights, and other vital concerns. And so when we look at the coming environment, our future will unfold simultaneously at global, regional, national, and local levels. The tools at our disposal will dwarf anything known to earlier generations, and scientific and technological change will outpace even our boldest imaginings. Science is an endless journey of exploration. We are its questions. As Muslim reminded us, it is the fertility of the questions that matter more than the finality of the answers. Yet, despite the transformations ahead, the enduring functions and values that have long defined academies will remain. Our guiding star is and must always be pursuit of truth, and every new discovery will be an addition to the reshaping of our scientific consensus, which we will recognize again as the best truth that can be gleaned from the evolving explorations of science at the moment. Indeed, as T.S. Eliot once said, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place where we started. So what should we do? I have 5 proposals that I think the academies must do to confront the challenges of our turbulent times and remain true to their core mission that has been honed during the last half century. First, we must redouble our efforts at protecting these core functions against political, economic, and social incursions against it. Recall that these core functions include upholding the highest standards of rigor in research, setting ethical principles for inquiry and the deployment of the technologies that it yields, reaching out to institutions of learning around the world, for scientists are a global community and speak the same language, providing governments with the most expert and dispassionate counsel, and advancing science-based policies and evidence-grounded regulation. And to these functions, we must increasingly become involved with the social issues of our time. And by that means that the academies should become active participants in the debates raging in our societies. And in order to do so well, academies should build bridges that complement the knowledge of the natural sciences with the insights of the social sciences and the wisdom of the humanities. Thus, expanded teams should look at the complex problems of today and tomorrow. And this is much more than what was implied in C.P. Snow's famous Dialogue of Two Cultures. Second, the governance of the academy must remain in the hands of its members, both in who they accept and what priorities they pursue. The scope of their work and how they choose to execute it must remain in the hands of the membership, not subject to the whims of politicians or the pet projects of wealthy donors. This may be difficult in times of austerity and limited funding, but it is a challenge that has to be met. Here, reinforcing the case of science as a social public good that deserves public support is important. And this is not to deny that some excellent governmental institutions in a number of countries do undertake a scope of work that overlaps considerably with what we term the functions of the academy. But I'm speaking of, and to, the academies as learned societies with a long tradition of autonomy and independence. Third, I believe that the academies and their university partners should recognize a new discipline, that of science communication. If our message to society and the world is to be heard and accepted, whether it is by written text or audio recordings or movies and videos, or the special language of the social media of the internet, effective communication requires the skills of a professional. Let the factual, useful knowledge produced by science reach society in a meaningful way. Only thus will the truthful message of science rival in its power and intensity the destructive message of the conspiracy theorists who trade in falsehoods. Fourth, I believe that the distinctions between basic and applied research need to be revisited. In my view, with the internationalization of science and the spread of the scope of research and the need for the advanced scientific countries to help the poor and lagging countries in joining the quest for a meaningful science, we can benefit from past experience. More specifically, I'm thinking of the success of the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, CGIR, that model of international cooperation in agricultural research that built on the success of the Green Revolution in India and brought so many benefits to the world. Indeed, the ISC had a similar idea calling for hubs of international assistance to help mobilization of the best science to promote sustainable development throughout the world, even among the poorest. But the key for such hubs or international institutions of research and collaboration between various institutions across the world to work effectively is to recognize that the steps in research are not just two, basic and applied. It is four. We go from basic to strategic, and then from strategic to applied to adaptive. With the most advanced institutions in the world pushing the envelope of basic research, the international centers or hubs connecting that strategic needs and then applying them, and then overlapping with the national institutions in the applied and adaptive part that is needed, even in the poorest and most lagging places, overlapping with international and local is essential. And that's, for example, looking at genome editing for agriculture, the basic breakthroughs such as CRISPR-Cas9 could be a basic idea, but then strategically we need to decide what traits we need to develop and how you would use that technique or others to achieve that. And then applied would be to develop these traits in particular crops. And then the adaptable part requires that the modified crops with desirable traits have to be taken and adapted to the local agroecology of the region. And these academies, in their core functions of promoting international science cooperation, can be extremely valuable in making such cooperation functional within a framework truly science-guided priorities meet the needs of the rest of the world. And fifth, the academies should think of creating a category, associate members, for promising young scientists to help nurture their growth and allow these rising young leaders to interact with the membership of the academy. And I believe that this would be beneficial to both the youth and the elders. And so, to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, there is a tide in the affairs of men, taken at the flood in some fortune, committed all the voyage of their lives is bound in shadows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current which serves and lose our venture. So said the bard, that we shall not lose our ventures. We shall bend the future to match our dreams, for we are practitioners of science, and science is the culture of living change. Science, as Van Bush reminded us, is the endless frontier. But science can feed the world, protect the environment, heal the sick, bring dignity to work, and create the space for self-expression. And that negative culture and social realities can coexist, may even arise from this exciting reality of a world where all barriers are falling and the unlimited future is within our grasp, is nothing new. Indeed, already a century ago, T.S. Eliot recently asked, where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in knowledge? That was a century ago. And in this headlong rush to embrace the age of big data and endless information, it's pertinent to remember that data, when organized, becomes information, and information, when explained, becomes knowledge. But humanity, locally, nationally, regionally, and globally, requires more than knowledge. We need wisdom. And thus I ask that the academies recognize that beyond the knowledge produced by the natural sciences, we need the insights of the social sciences and the wisdom of the humanities. Only thus will the recommendations of the academies fully resonate with a rapidly changing and increasingly skeptical society. The academies need to build such bridges to remain true to their mission in these times of rapid change and political turbulence. My friends, it is a call to action. On this day and from this place, I ask that we redouble our commitment to the pursuit of science. To the youthful members of our academic community, I say, to the wrongs that need assistance, to the wrongs that need resistance, to the rights that need assistance, and to the future in the distance, commit yourselves. That's the words of Carrie Chapman Catt. To the elders of our academic community, I say, you are and must remain young at heart. Years may wrinkle skin, but to give up our ideals, lose our curiosity, or forget our commitment to the defense of truth, that wrinkles the soul. The years may mark our bodies, but we can remain young at heart. For you are as young as your faith, as old as your doubt, as young as your dreams, as old as your cynicism, as young as your self-confidence, as old as your fear, as young as your hope, and as old as your despair. Only if you give in to pessimism and lose your heart to cynicism, then and then only are you grown old. And then indeed, as Douglas MacArthur observed, you just fade away. Together, all armed with the values of science, we must redouble our commitment to advance the scientific enterprise. And in pursuing our vocation, we can think of the unborn, remember the forgotten, give hope to the forlorn, include the excluded, and reach out to the unreached. And by our actions from this day onward, lay the foundations of better tomorrows. Thank you.
Well, I think that was quite an extraordinary beginning to our conference. Thank you so very much. That was, I think, just truly inspiring, the critical insights, observations, and recommendations. It was a tour de force. I have to confess that I think I'm going to have to watch it on video again and maybe again in order to be able to really pull out all of the um, meaning and wisdom that were embedded in that presentation. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about my visit to the Grand Egyptian Museum and how extraordinary it must have been when the archaeologists started opening the tomb of King Tut, and one treasure more extraordinary than the next came out. And I felt that way listening to your speech. So thank you so much. And I think we all deeply appreciate your time with us today.